Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. This is Andrew the Corn-Fed Viking. Today we're going to be building a 1675 Coke GMT watch with exclusively Raffles parts. Here's a quick shot of the parts list. I'll have links for all that down in the description below, but let's go ahead and get right into it here. We're going to start with the dial feet and date wheel overlay. You can see here I have already trimmed off. There's plenty of videos that show that, but I've trimmed off the feet that I don't need. Left the ones that'll fit the movement that I'm using here. And then, like you've probably seen other folks do, I'm just going to take a little metal file or a file here and take off the little nubs. Kind of showing you the process here. I did most of it off screen. This is my first video, so especially with watch builds, so give me a little bit of levity here, but trying to blow off the rest of that kind of leftover debris that ends up on the dial there, so none of that gets into the movement, but giving you a close-up shot here in just a second of the dial. That's the Tiffany Co dial, has the quote super yellow luminova on it. I really like the way this dial looks. I think it's a really cool kind of vintage vibe to it. I've seen some of these builds before on Reddit, some other places, so that one really kind of stuck out to me and motivated me to do the same thing. I've done a couple of other, quote Seco mod builds prior to this. This is my first one using Raffles parts, but everything went together fairly smoothly. There's a little bit of a mark on this dial, and I thought I'd be able to get it off, but it appears somewhere in the shifting around I made a little mark on it, but didn't end up being a huge deal or super noticeable on the end build. So here I am trying to fit this dial onto that movement, the 2836. It's one that I got off AliExpress. Obviously not a real ETA, but one of the Chinese clone ones. Again, I'll have a link in the description below for that piece. So there's a little bit of a spacer that sits underneath the dial in between there and the movement that was kind of a pain for me to deal with, even though it shouldn't have been. But of course, this is a learning process, and one of the reasons I wanted to show this video is to show you some of the mistakes that I made, and that it's not all rosy, but trying to point out here the areas where the dial feet stick in. And I thought originally that the dial feet were sticking a little bit too deep, but that was before I realized that spacer needed to be in there to allow for those dial feet to sit into the recesses how they should. So this is just kind of showing you what the dial looks like here on the movement, and kind of just a mock-up of what it looks like in the case there real quick. So very happy overall with all these Raffles parts. I thought everything looked pretty good. The bracelet was a little bit chintzy, but we'll talk about that a little bit later as we get into that part of the build. So you can see the date wheel overlay piece sitting on the kind of the watch pad there. Get a zoom in view of it there. And this part, I'd read on the RWI forums about a method where you could make just a tiny little mark, with a Sharpie or something similar on the very outside edge of the date wheel itself, and then also on the overlay. On the corresponding number, I chose 31 for the number that I did this on. So that's what I did to try and line these up. So here I am, just sped up a little bit, mixing 5-minute epoxy, just some stuff that I already had sitting around my shop. But I'd read that that's a good option for something to use on this. So here it is zoomed in a little bit, and I'm just using a tiny little bit on a toothpick to try and spread it around evenly and not get too much. The last thing I wanted was for excess epoxy to squeeze out underneath the date wheel overlay and then cause any issues with the dial getting adhered to it and causing issues with the movement of the date wheel itself. So trying to be very cautious about just getting enough epoxy to hold the date wheel overlay on there, and not so much that would cause any issues down the road. I did end up getting epoxy pretty much all the way around. You can see that I'm kind of doing a last little pass here to make sure it's spread out evenly and that there is some for establishing a contact point all the way around. So that's it. That's all the epoxy that I put on there, and you know, here we go with trying to get that date wheel. So you can see right next to the 31, there's a tiny little mark there. And again, that's what I'm using. There's a corresponding mark on the outside of the actual date wheel on the movement. And you know, here it's just a matter of trying to get those lined up as good as possible. The reason for using that 5-minute epoxy versus something, you know, that's quicker acting is that this will give you a little bit of time to make adjustments on it, so you can kind of put the dial over the top of it, make sure that the dates look aligned with the date window on the dial, and then whatever shifts or adjustments you need to make, there's still some time left on that epoxy set time for you to make whatever adjustments you might need. So this one I didn't need to make much for adjustments. I was able to pretty much get it done on the first try. I think I had one tiny little adjustment, but that I think is some good evidence of the little mark outside of the dates working good as a way to get that aligned and have minimal adjustment that you need to make afterwards. So here I'm going to put the dial back over the top of it just to see. And I don't think I had that spacer on there when I did this, so just kind of playing with fire there. If there had been any epoxy squeeze out that would have caused any issues, but you know, and I know my hands are in the way for a lot of shots in this video, and for future ones I've got a mount to put the camera up over the top so it's not, my hands aren't in the way so much. So apologies for that, but you know, I'm still learning here as far as this goes. So there you can see the 31 is aligned pretty good in there. Now one thing that I wish I'd done is click through some more of the dates to check those. I kind of just looked at the 31 and thought that looked good. So I wish that I'd gone through some other ones because the double digit numbers all look pretty good, but some of the single digit numbers are a little biased toward the top of the number. The top of the number is like pretty close to the actual date wheel or the date window on the dial. So that's one thing I wish I'd done differently here, but you know, lessons learned, I guess. And overall, I'm very happy with how it turned out. The date's not going to be a big issue for me. Okay, here's just a close-up view of it again. You can see that the dates align pretty good there. The angle of how I was holding it, you couldn't really see it all that well, but so now obviously just taking the dial back off there, and I think I make a tiny little adjustment on it here, but it's pretty good to go. Nope, I guess I already did the adjustment on it, so leave it sitting there here, and then get going with the next part of the build here. So this part is where I'm actually going to set the dial in and kind of get that finished up. So here's that little ring. I'm trying to point to it here with the tweezers. It's that little, you kind of saw it move there, but the little silver ring. I wasn't sure the best way to get this put on there, if it was best to try and put it around the feet on the dial first and then press it on to the movement, or to have, there's two little notches that sit around the feet, the mounting feet on the dial. So it took me a little fiddling to figure out the best way to do it. But ultimately what I figured out is that it should, for this movement anyway, there was another one I was working on, a 1655 build, where that little movement spacer or the dial spacer actually kind of friction fit on the feet good, and so it was able to sit on the dial while I was pushing it onto the movement. This one was a lot looser, so I'll show you a side view here of where that piece sits. You kind of see it in between the dial and the movement there, and there's a better shot of the date wheel, and the overlay looks like, to me, pretty perfect on the 31 there. So But again, on this one, I had to put that piece on the movement and then push the dial onto it. And I just had to make sure those little notches for the feet were in the right spots on the movement for it to push in there right. Hopefully that makes sense. So here I am getting a little further along with actually mounting the dial, and there's that tiny little U-shaped washer that should be the bottom of the U should be on the bottom of the movement, the wing should be pointing up. I put it on there and I was kind of wondering, it didn't seem like it fit right, and you can see up at the top of my mat there, right by the base of that drawer that's open, there's a tiny little gear there, kind of the bottom right of the screen, I guess, but the top right of the mat as I was facing it. And that spacer, that U-shaped spacer, didn't seem like it was fit on there right. And eventually I realized that this little piece, which I'd found on the floor of my shop, needed to be put on there. That's the actual GMT wheel that moves the GMT, excuse me, part of the watch. So I'll kind of suffer through here a little bit of trying to get this GMT hand on here and realizing at some point that I don't have the right piece, the right pieces on the movement fully together. But again, I wanted to show some of the mistakes and struggles that I made, or that I kind of went through to get this watch put together. And you know, here I am pushing it on here and realizing that, well, it doesn't really seem like there's a post for that GMT hand to fit onto. So it takes me a minute here to figure this out, but eventually I do realize that, hey, I've not got the right parts on there. And I almost threw that piece away when I found it on the floor of my shop. I thought, you know, what the heck is this thing? I don't know when it fell off or how it fell off, but obviously it did when I was inspecting the movement when I first got it. So here I am kind of scratching my head thinking, you know, why isn't this? And I thought, well, maybe that spacer ring is only supposed to be on there for certain types of watches. I was going through some kind of mental gymnastics trying to figure out, all right, maybe I'll pull the dial off and take the ring off. So I did take that ring off, and then anyway, here we are with number 2, and me realizing that that gear needed to go on there. So there it is, that gear piece. Finally had the light bulb moment that needed to be on there. So got that on there. Now you can see me reach for that little U-shaped washer. I apologize for the focus not being great here. But there's that U-shaped washer on there that, again, helps to put pressure on the dial so that the GMT part will turn correctly and not interfere with any of the rest of the functions. So now that silver spacer is back on there again, and for at least the 3rd time, if not the 4th, I've got the dial going back on here. So, and this one is just a pressure fit. There are not screws that you mount the feet into like the DG3804 that I was working with on the 1655 build, which I'll get to finishing and posting here hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Well, now what I had done is I put the GMT hand on, but then I realized that I forgot to set the date over to 12 o'clock so that the hand would be in sync with the date wheel change. So now I've got to take that off. So again, another mistake that I made. So I think I had to try and set that GMT hand like 3 times, maybe 4, but not a big deal. It's good practice getting it off. So got that off. Now I'm going here to set the time, or to set the date, excuse me. So it's perfectly at 12 o'clock. And I've got that set now. And there are lots of videos that show different ways of setting the hands, but the Rodico version has worked the best for me in the watch builds that I've done so far. I figure you've got the least chance of damaging the hands doing it that way. And one thing that I did not realize until after I just got this hand setting tool, and the way that they're set up on there is not very intuitive. So And I think I'd actually read that somewhere before that they're not in order, but one thing that I didn't realize is that that gold one you can see there is actually the one to be used for the GMT. So I had found this other method before I got this that the tweezers held very carefully and pushed down actually worked pretty good to get that GMT hand on there. I'd done that on some NH34 movements also. So anyway, I got it on there that way, but now moving forward, I know to use the gold hand, and I've actually rearranged those to where they're in an order that makes more sense to me. So there you can see that 6, the single digit, like I talked about earlier, is a little bit biased towards the top of the date window, but got the GMT hand out there on there without too much fuss. Now moving on to the hour hand. And this tool is really handy, and I was able to get the hands on without too much fuss with some of the more manual tools that are available. But, you know, I really like the convenience and the speed at which people seem to have with this contraption. So I bought this a couple weeks ago and finally had a chance to use it with this build. So overall, super happy with it. I got that off AliExpress too. I'll put a link for that one down there as well. So got the hour hand on, moving on to the minutes hand, and again, sorry for the lack of focus on this, but you can see I did finally remember to switch over to the actual minute hand here, or the minute hand press. So got that one going on, and I know people have had a lot of issues with seconds hands. You know, you seem to read a lot about that, but luckily, knock on wood, I have not had any major issues with doing second-hand installs yet. So hopefully that trend continues, and it actually went on super fast for this one. So now I've got the hour, minute, and GMT hand all installed. There's just a little bit of a smudge on one of those hands that I'm trying to get off here with the Rodico, but here you're just trying to make sure there's clearance for everything and that everything you know, there's no rubbing of any of the hands on the other ones, and everything's looking good. One thing that I was a little surprised about was how far out that GMT hand sticks, but that's how it looks on all the you know, the genuine photos that I've seen and whatnot. It was just bigger than I thought it was going to be compared to some of the other GMT hands that I've done on builds so far. And again, you can kind of see there that 6 is really close to the top of that date window, but you know, again, not a huge deal for me anyway. Some people probably would be bothered by that, but I don't find myself looking enough at the watch, especially after wearing it a few times, that really matters. But you can see it clicked over to the 7. The 7's probably the worst looking number on there of the ones that I've seen so far. So here comes the second hand, which is conveniently blocked by my hand yet again. I'll have to figure out a better way to video the hand installs moving forward, but there's a million of those videos out there, so you'll probably see that elsewhere. So I've got that all. So this is a part that gave me a lot of trepidation here. I had to get the stem out, and I've read about people messing up the keyless works on these movements, the 2836 movements, and so I was really paranoid about this, and I had already ruined the keyless works on a 3804 movement that I was working on, that 1655 build. I've got another one on order, so here I am kind of contemplating how to get this out, because of course you can't reverse mount that, you know, now that the dial and hands are on there, so you have to kind of do this as one fail swoop, but it came out pretty easily. Actually, I was surprised how easily that came out. And now I spent the next however long being paranoid that I'd ruin the keyless works, but I wouldn't know that until I get the dial mounted, or excuse me, the stem put back in there. So took the case apart, got the gasket out, and you know, working on mounting this. Now this is another part that really gave me some confusion here. There's another ring, a movement spacer ring, that I, for whatever reason, thought went in between the dial and the case, but it actually goes in last after you get the movement and the dial put into the case. So don't make that same mistake. I fiddled around with it for far too long before I realized that that movement spacer goes in after you put the dial in, so it doesn't go in first. I thought maybe it was like a chapter ring or something, but again, I'm pretty new at this, so trying to figure it all out and share with you some of the mistakes that I made, that hopefully you won't do it. So you can see that it fell out there, and I'm sitting here thinking, well, how the hell do you get this thing in here if it's loose like that? But eventually I again have the light bulb moment of realizing that it goes in after the movement. So spend a minute or two here thinking about it. So there I got it in, and you can see the spacer sitting there next to the screwdriver. So now I realize, okay, that's how it goes in. There's a little notch for it to sit to allow the stem to come in over the top of it. So obviously just make sure you align it correctly. The one thing that, oh, there goes the crown piece that I almost lost on the floor. So here I am trying to push the stem back in, and this movement did not come with an extra stem like a lot of the movements, at least the NH movements that I've worked with do. So, you know, I thought, well, maybe I have to take this little plastic piece off, and luckily it did unscrew off there. I had a little pin vise that I put that in there because it wouldn't fit back into the movement with that plastic piece on there. So now I've got the crown on to it, and then luckily I was able to get that back into the movement pretty much right away with just a little push and a little twist, and popped right back in there. And then I gave it a little wind and pulled it out, and sure enough, the movement looked to be moving how it should, and the seconds hand was, I guess it's not moving yet, but once I get it going here, you'll see that everything was good to go there. So that was a big relief that I didn't mess up the keyless works, and that I was you know, able to scratch that one off the list. So I did trim the stem off the camera. I forgot to record that part of it, but again, there's tons of videos there about how to trim the stem effectively. So got that trimmed up, and there's some little movement holder screws and clamps, I guess, or tiny little pieces of metal that you put in the back there also that holds everything in there. So again, I forgot to record that too, so apologies about that, but it's pretty intuitive. I for once didn't have any confusion about that, so that went in there pretty good. So gonna get the gasket lubricated here, and then put back into the movement, or into the case, excuse me. So getting pretty close to the finish line here, which was exciting for me. The bracelet gives me some issues coming up, but overall this build has gone pretty good. Obviously a couple of learning opportunities, a couple of mistakes, but that's how we all learn and get better, right? So the gasket lined up in the groove there. Again, that's pretty intuitive, self-explanatory to get that put in there in the right spot. Little finessing to get it in there properly, and then get the case back, put onto it. And I'm sure you've heard it a million times before, but those little balls, the rubber balls, are awesome for especially getting the case back started. In terms of getting it on or off, I do have a case back tool that's, you know, got the right mounting piece for that, but this is really good for kind of getting the threads established and started in there. So get that going, and then I'll use the case back tool to tighten it up, and you'll see that I tried tightening it a little bit too much and things slipped off, and right there. But didn't do any damage to it, so that was good. Now this bracelet, again, the only real critique I have of these parts, everything else I thought was pretty well made and, you know, seemed quality, but the bracelet is a little bit chintzy to me. It's kind of rattly, and the inside links, kind of the middle part of that Jubilee bracelet, are hollow. So it kind of made it tricky to get the links off for the fitting. I mean, obviously I was able to do it without too much issue, but you know, I usually just use a little tiny flathead screwdriver to get these pushed in there. I know there's those special tools, but for whatever reason, those have never worked all that good for me. So got the bracelet more or less installed here. It does have the kind of standard little flathead screws. So here's a good shot of the watch. with the correct time set on the 29th when I finished it. You can see a better shot of the bracelet. It looks nice for sure. It's just the actual feel of it is just a little bit chintzy, I would say, but it does have a nice look and, you know, certainly accomplishes the mission. And one thing that I just super duper love about this watch is that big crystal on there. I love the way that these vintage crystals, the top hats, or, you know, whatever it is they call those, I just love the way those kind of stick off the face of the watch. I think those are one of my favorite features of these vintage watches. So you got a little bit of a view there of how those are hollow, those internal parts of the links. And here I am just doing a little bit of a fitting of the bracelet, and this is maybe where I stabbed my thumb. No, not quite. So again, you can see there how those are hollow on the inside, and one of these screws I had a hell of a time getting out. I luckily did not have to reinstall the one screw that I more or less stripped, and I was getting super frustrated, as you tend to with these watch builds, a time or two during it. And you know, of course, close to the finish line, and I've having this issue with trying to get the dang screw out of there, and it was just giving me all kinds of headaches, but I did eventually get it out, and I ordered some better screwdrivers also to, you know, hopefully help with that. I don't know that that would have made a huge difference on this, because that screw was just super stubborn in there and really hard to get out. So, but oh, there it was, the stabbing of the thumb. So here I am back with a band-aid on there, and just doing the last little link here. And I think I had to reinstall the bracelet because I had the clasp on the wrong way. So here I am taking it off and redoing it, because what watch build would be complete without having to redo something like that when you're so close to the finish line. So, but I finally taught myself, or learned, that the 6 o'clock position is where the opening of the clasp should be. Took me way too long to figure that out, but again, repetition will help all this, and you know, hopefully I'll not have to deal with some of those repetitive issues in future builds. So just some final steps here of getting this bracelet put back on the right way this time. Again, just using that little flathead, probably like a 0.8 or 0.6 millimeter size, smaller ones, and obviously trying not to put any scratches on the case, but I'm sure I had a few of those also. I've read and you know, seen a lot of people doing these Vietnam parts with these vintage builds, which I hope to kind of investigate a little bit further as time goes on. But you know, for now, I thought the Raffles gives a pretty budget-friendly opportunity, and all the parts you need. I mean, all that stuff's there. Ken, Chua Ken, as his name comes through on emails, is a super nice guy, good guy to deal with, and you know, has been very responsive about the right kind of parts, making sure you've got all the right stuff in your shopping cart before you order it. All the orders have come through, I'd say, in, you know, roughly 10 to 14 days or so. No shipping issues. I did have a gasket that was missing underneath the bezel here, so here's a finished shot of it. You know, it just turned out really good, so super happy with everything here. But he was supposed to send a replacement bezel with my next order, but that didn't come, so I found one on eBay. One of the guys on Reddit on the Retro Time forum helped me find a replacement one, so it's on there and all good now. So that more or less wraps it up. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Thanks.